Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's Investors Discovery Day live stream, January 27th, 2021. Welcome back. And for anybody that's new, what our program is about is bringing you those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside potential. We've had a number of 10 baggers last year. We've had a number of stocks that are up, in the high triple digits already, just in the recent weeks, weeks really. And so today we're going to introduce you to a new company, Novamind, and we're going to find out if Novamind is going to be that next 10 bagger. So I'm going to introduce you to Yaron Conforti, he's the CEO, and we're gonna have a quick chat and make sure to ask your questions because it's your questions that really make these events special. So please, check out the live stream, ask your questions, and then decide for yourself if Novamind is going to be our next 10 bagger. So Yaron, with that said, welcome to the program.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Here we go. Okay, so Yaron, as you heard, our audience, they're very spoiled. They've had a number of big winners in recent months. So, they want to know if Novamind is going to be that next, home run, that next 10x plus stock. So, let's find out. Tell us about what exactly does Novamind do in the psychedelic space? Let's start off with that.
Thanks, Jack. It's good context because I do understand that your investors are very involved in the psychedelic space. Of course, we're seeing a lot of capital flow into the space. We're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs and companies that are emerging. So Novamind specifically is a infrastructure company, and I want to make that differentiation for you and your guests, your listeners, excuse me. By infrastructure, I mean we operate a network of mental health clinics. So we are not drug developers. We're not in the lab hoping for the advent of psychedelic medicine and drugs that may or may not be available in the future. We are operating today with our 4 clinics. Just to give you an idea of the scale at which we're operating, we had over 20,000 client visits in 2020. Okay, and on a year-over-year basis,
with 4 clinics.
That's right, with 4 clinics. So on a year-over-year basis compared to 2019, that's about a double in the amount of client visits. And we've disclosed that publicly in a news release where we expanded one of our clinics. So that's information that's in the public domain. So we are operating at scale already, seeing many thousands of patients in those clinics. We're also operating a clinical research organization, which is also called a contract research organization. And that's the second pillar of our business. And that is called Cedar Clinical Research, whereas the mental health clinics are called Cedar Psychiatry. Those are the 2 brands. And Cedar Clinical Research, as opposed to mental health clinics where clients can come and access these alternative mental health modalities, the CCR component is to provide the clinical trial services to drug developers that want to develop those drugs. So world-leading pharmaceutical companies, academic institutions, not-for-profits, they will come to Cedar Clinical Research. We will, in some cases, design trials, or they'll design the trials. We will recruit patients in the Salt Lake City area where our clinics are based now, and we will run those trials for them and provide them with the data that they need to get through the FDA process.
Okay, so I think the takeaway is that you have 4 clinics right now, right? So that means you're generating revenues.
Absolutely. Just to be clear, again, our operating history in 2019, we were generating a couple $1 million of revenue profitably, and we're expecting that to expand fairly dramatically. Given what I mentioned on our existing network, we've doubled the amount of client visits. We're also growing the amount of clinics, both through M&A and organically. So that clinic business is really set for growth.
Okay, so before I ask you exactly how far and how fast can you scale, what exactly happens in these clinics? It's what goes on there?
I'm glad you asked because maybe some of your viewers will be familiar and some might not. So when you go to a typical outpatient mental health clinic, you'll be offered services like cognitive behavioral therapy, maybe prescription management by a psychiatrist, maybe there's a nutritionist on staff. In our case, if you walked into a Cedar psychiatry clinic, you'd have those, the spectrum of services that people are familiar with that I just described. And you'd also have a spectrum of alternative neuropsychiatric modalities. Things like ketamine assisted psychotherapy, that of course a lot of people are talking about ketamine as the first legal psychedelic. Spravato, which is a prescription form of ketamine. TMS would be another example, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And the compounds like MDMA and psilocybin that people are talking about, when legalized, we fully expect to bring them online. So this is what I mean by spectrum of alternative health, mental health modalities that we are already offering in our clinics and elsewhere.
Okay. Okay. And so like, so so the ketamine, like what is the, when somebody goes to the clinic, what are they there for? Like, and how does the ketamine help them?
So typically, in terms of an intake, understand that we're absolutely medical in how we approach our clients. So the first process is a screening process where one of our psychiatrists or leading therapists will attend to the client and essentially do both a historical analysis and a status check to figure out what the best course of action for them. And I wanted to make that really clear because ketamine is not the right approach for everybody. And although we're spending a lot of time talking about it, and Cedar is, of course, a specialist in the field, we've done over 4,000 ketamine-assisted psychotherapy treatments, just to give you an idea, and over 2,000 Spravato treatments, which is the prescription form of ketamine. So we have deep, deep expertise, but unless we feel it's appropriate for that client, we won't necessarily put them in it. So back to how we do approach that client is that spectrum of alternative modalities are available to them, and we will try the best match the best modality with that person's condition.
Okay, so the focus really is going to be is using psychedelics as therapies. Right now you have the ketamine, and then you want to get into the the psilocybin and the MDMA. That's going to be once at some point. It looks like it's going to happen shortly. Like it's okay. So and you also have a contract research business.
Correct.
Okay, and that's for what? That's for the psychedelic medicines, like what? And
that's right. That it manages the clinical trials that many people are hearing about. And by the way, I want to go back to, you're absolutely right to point out, Jack, that when people talk about the legalization of MDMA, it is expected fairly soon. 2023 is the hope. And when they talk about the legalization of psilocybin, again, I'm defining legalization as available as a prescription in the United States. So this is really soon. I concur with you. And for a company like us, the goal is to be one of the top 5 clinics companies in the psychedelic space. And the way we're going about doing that is by expanding that base very quickly. We partnered our way into the business. So instead of starting clinics from zero, we partnered our way in. We acquired those 4 clinics. Those clinics have this very significant and widely known expertise through our chief medical officer, Dr. Reed Robison. He is one of the coordinating investigators for the MDMA clinical trial in phase 3 currently, led by MAPS. So he's very widely known for his expertise in psychedelic medicine. And it's well understood in our industry that for lots of people, the many, many people that will want to access these treatments, we're going to need thousands of clinics. Okay, to be clear, that's very well understood.
So that is okay. So that's a key takeaway. So there's going to be a demand for thousands of these clinics. Okay, so from what I understand, okay, so the legalization, all this stuff is going to happen. The next, let's call it 18 to 24 months. But the idea is you want to be there again. To use the hockey metaphor, you want to be where the puck is heading. You're not going to be chasing after the puck 2 years from now. You want to build it now so that when the wave comes in, that's where the value is created.
That's exactly right. We've been building it for the last 2 years, in fact. So objectively, when we look at our peer group and we compare what we've built and how we continue to build on this platform, the big differentiator is in fact that we're treating people now. So we've also got major investments in the Netherlands, where if appropriate, one of our medical team can refer an appropriate client to that legal psilocybin experience today in the Netherlands before it's available stateside. So we've effectively built our infrastructure so that we can treat people today, and we've been doing that. And it's important that your listeners understand that we are not simply building for the future. We are revenue generating, cash flowing. In fact, we do make millions of dollars a year helping many, many thousands, as I said, with clients. And the advent of MDMA and psilocybin as prescription drugs, what I'll make the clear distinction for the audience is that these are not self-administered drugs. The prescription will require you to go somewhere and have this experience. And currently the protocols require for 2 therapists, okay, 2, not just 1, 2 highly trained therapists. So in addition to the thousands of clinics, which I'm sure your listeners can now understand why, if these are supervised treatments, and if a trip takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours and requires 2 therapists, then the infrastructure to go along with that really requires thousands of clinics to serve the hundreds of thousands or millions of people that want these opportunities.
Interesting. Okay, so we got an audience comment, which I think kind of sums up the idea. Is it's kind of like a picks and shovels business in the psychedelic industry. So so it's like, you're basically you're making money now, and as new, as legalization comes in, there's new compounds, etc. Psychedelic stuff. You're there ready to
yeah, I'm very comfortable with that analogy, because the other thing I'll add to that, and it's a good bit of insight, is that we're also we're drug agnostic. Okay, we're agnostic in every sense, which means that we want to work with as many people as possible. So if psilocybin via a for-profit company, which is the case, and reaches the end of its clinical trial before the not-for-profit company, we'll be open to working with one or both. If drug developers want to start working on exotic compounds, more exotic compounds than the classics, things like DMT, things like 5-MeO, etc., we're very open and in fact engaged on working with those people. So it allows us the opportunity to essentially participate in the clinical phase trial process that's required to make these drugs legal. And because we participate in the clinical trials, we get the experience, we get our therapists trained. So the moment they come online, our expectation is that if we, to the general public in the United States and worldwide in terms of our expansion, if we were trusted to participate and lead the clinical trials for MDMA, we expect we'll be trusted to help people facilitate that experience for themselves.
Okay, so that's very interesting. Okay, so first let me ask you this. So you have 4 clinics now. How big is the market opportunity in this space, like for these clinics for psychedelic therapies? Like, how big is it right now? What's the size of the market right now? Let's say, I don't know, in North America, and where do you think it's going to be in, let's call it 2-3 years from now?
I can't put a number, unfortunately. I'd like to know as well what that market size data point is specifically for psychedelic therapy clinics. And that's hard to do because, the psychedelic therapy clinics of the future are being built by people like us right now, right? They exist in these hybrid forms where some of the drugs aren't legal yet, and essentially you're putting in the pieces, as we spoke about before. But I'll speak about the market size in terms of outpatient mental health clinics, which is an industry we've gotten to know very well because, of course, we made acquisitions. And it's a very fragmented market, and it's in the hundreds of billions in terms of market size. And I suppose the most compelling part of this market, the reason I founded the business, the reason I've devoted my life to it for the last years and will continue to, is that what we all know without needing to be medical doctors is that the current standard of care is not working very well. So everybody knows someone that is touched by mental health, and very few people have access to alternatives. So that is, if they're not responding, or if they're not well served by the standard of care, and I think we all know people like this, they really don't have anywhere to go. So I can tell you the market for people who are out looking for those alternatives, we hear them all the time. Some of them come and travel to our clinics in Utah because we are so specialized, and we have been doing it since 2016. But that's the demand curve that we're focused on, and we're doing our best to satisfy that demand in the form of opening new clinics and new clinical research sites, which you'll see from us. You'll see some news on that in the coming weeks and months.
Okay. Okay. So we got a question. I guess one of the questions is, I think maybe the question really is like, what are you doing different than other psychiatric clinics? Like, what is and I guess maybe the question is, can can existing clinics get into this space? Like how are you gonna what's gonna differentiate you?
I think what we're doing and what differentiates already and will continue to is that we're treating people. So a typical outpatient mental health clinic will not adopt the alternative neuropsychiatric modalities that I've described. So just to make that really clear, when you talk about things like ketamine assisted psychotherapy or TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, or Spravato, it's a very specialized area of care. In some cases, Spravato is only a few years old since it was approved, and Reed Robison, our CMO, led the clinical trials in Utah for Spravato, which is a drug that was developed by Janssen, and is now effectively a key opinion leader where every week or month he's on the line sharing his experiences. So just to make it clear to everyone that these modalities, some of them are very much novel, and there aren't that many people that have a lot of experience with them. So it's about focusing on those modalities, pairing them with some of the traditional things like cognitive behavioral therapy. And so the answer to your question is yes, that opportunity is available to many practitioners. But what you'll find is that really only the special, there's only certain ones that have adopted it very early. And because they've been practicing like Dr. Robison for the past 5 years, they're that much better positioned to help us scale now. So those are the people we want to work with. And in fact, we have a pretty long list of partnerships, like-minded psychiatrists who are operating clinics. And if any of them are listening, I'd welcome them to reach out to me, because these are the kind of people we're working with, where they can adopt some of our expertise and we can work with them and creating these new psychedelic clinics of the future. So we're having a lot of success with that model now, Jack. Again, this isn't about the future. It's about opening these clinics and seeing clients now.
So you got four clinics. So we get a question here. I guess Tuan is asking, what is the average revenue per patient?
It's a very tough data point because we provide a spectrum of services. So if that patient is a ketamine patient versus a TMS patient, or maybe some combination of CBT thereof, unlike a widget company, it's a very curated service for each client. So there might be a mean, but it's not very relevant. We really want to match the right treatments to the clients. That's the goal.
Okay. So what kind of revenues, what are you generating the revenues like per clinic right now?
Sure. So the run rate of a clinic is roughly $1 million annualized, and all of our clinics are all open, in the near the Salt Lake area in Utah. So our first order of business will be expanding within Utah, but also outside of Utah. But that metric is a good one insofar as if we were to start, and we will be, for example, an organic clinic in Utah, we invest about $200,000 to get that clinic open, and that clinic, in our experience, reaches a run rate of $1 million annualized revenue in that first year. So that's what a new clinic looks like for us. We also have hybrid clinic retreats, which is a new model that we're working on, which to our knowledge is unprecedented. And in short, that's taking our clinical expertise that I talked about in Salt Lake and merging it with a retreat model that we've become very experienced at through our investments and some other collaborators we have. And you're able to take effectively a hybrid clinic retreat model. Instead of being in Salt Lake City, it could be in a place like Park City, Utah, if some people are familiar with that area, where it's essentially world-class nature destination and world-class destination for that. And in our industry, we call that change in physical location, partly set and setting. And the set and setting can have a very, very big impact on how efficacious the outcomes are for clients. So if you can imagine, if someone has a mental health condition, and we do a lot of work with them in the clinic in Salt Lake, in some cases with ketamine, as an example, there's essentially a limit you can get to of how much work the therapist can do in that set and setting. And if now they're able to provide that experience in Park City with the nature, which again, the data has proven in psychedelic medicine that setting, that nature setting, can have a very positive impact, then again, to point out, it's something we can provide today, not in the future at some point, but we can take our expertise on the clinic side and the retreat side, and there's another model of clinics you'll see. So that would operate probably a little bigger in terms of scale than a traditional clinic. And an average clinic now somewhere around 4,000 square feet is what a clinic would look like, operating at a run rate of about $1 million a year.
Okay. And what about are you going to expand, like when you talk about retreats? I know like some places are, they're doing like these retreats for psychedelic medicines or in areas where it's legal. I don't know, outside of the U.S. They do like ayahuasca, all that. Are you going to get
Right.
into that market?
Well, we're into it in the sense that our leading practitioners, I've mentioned Reed Robison, and there's other research scientists that work with us. They've published in medical journals because they've been working with these compounds for years in a medical and research context. So our approach is that we only operate in jurisdictions where a certain compound is legal, and we only operate at a standard of care that is equivalent to what we offer in the United States now. So the short answer is yes, we are and will continue to be involved in retreat work. What that looks like is either we were referring someone to an entity that we have an affiliation with, like exists in the Netherlands today, or we're setting up a retreat with our people, our practitioners, again, that are known thought leaders already in psychedelic medicine. They've been working with these groups for many years, and they essentially are replicating their protocols and their models for helping people in retreats that we'll set up in those legal jurisdictions. So imagine a much more institutional grade, medical, totally medical version of a retreat where that quality of standard of care is similar to what you would see in the United States.
Okay. And so I guess the question is how far and how fast can this scale? I mean, can this be, $100 million revenue business, $1 billion, and how fast, how long would it take to get there? And only, I think I'm only asking about just the clinic side, not the contract research, or if you want to talk about both.
Sure, I think it's relevant to talk about both in terms of our growth prospects, because we think that the clinical research business can be massive. But I'll speak to the clinics first. I think when you talk in orders of 100 million or $1 billion, order of magnitude, I do think that's reasonable, and that's based on really the demand curve. So we're seeing the demand for these treatments. I think everyone can agree that COVID has exacerbated that pull effect, I call it, where people are looking for alternatives in mental health. So this isn't a situation where we need to convince people that our wares are good and they otherwise aren't disposed to try. People are highly predisposed now to seeking out alternative mental health treatments to improve or increase their quality of life. So if you look at that as a market size, I could argue me and everyone I know is in that market too. And I think the stigma is being removed. So when you remove the stigma, that market size is going to get a hell of a lot bigger on that basis as people feel more and more comfortable. And that's essentially the vein in which we're building these clinics. We want to make it easy for people and comfortable for people, and maybe most importantly, safe. Okay, the keyword is safe, because Jack, I don't know what your background is or some of your listeners. People come at this from different cultural vantage points. They know more and less about these experiences like psilocybin and MDMA. But for a very large group of people, it's safety that is the bottom line. And they will not take the risk. And I can appreciate that. They won't take the risk unless that regulatory infrastructure is there to guarantee the safety and efficacy of their experience. And that's what we're building. That by the time clients come to see us in a world in 2023, which hopefully MDMA is available to PTSD sufferers first, that they will have no doubt whatsoever, and that we provide that very well understood standard of care that can then be replicated, as I said, over the thousands of clinics that are going to be needed to treat millions of people. So it's really for us a very clear path where we got our work cut out for us. We're not guessing at how to do this. It's about taking the platform that treated 20,000 clients last year, or 20,000 client visits, excuse me, and scaling that in exponential terms.
Okay, so we got a question, I think, about the contract research side of the business. How, I guess the question is, how much are you generating now, and how big do you expect that to be in the future?
I expect it to be a very big part of Novamind's top line and bottom line in the future. So today it's it's less than 20% of our revenue base. How about that? Okay, without getting specific, we haven't disclosed financials for 2020, somewhat limited, but it's less than 20%. The reason for that is that in the about 8 trials that we have ongoing right now at Cedar Clinical Research, most of those are at a very early stage, and they're limited to the one site because that is what we've been offering pharmaceutical clients. Now, to give everybody a bit of a window into what that work looks like today, we have trials that include Tourette syndrome for large pharmaceutical company, borderline personality disorder. These are drugs being developed to treat these disorders. Of course, I mentioned the work we're doing with MAPS and MDMA. We have work with the Ketamine Research Foundation focused on therapies for end-of-life distress. So it's a spectrum of research that's going on. The more clinical trials that we are contracted to do, the more that revenue profile will grow. So what I'll tell you and your viewers today is that when you start seeing news from us as far as new clinical trials that we have in the pipeline and that we'll be announcing, I think the clients, that is our client, the drug developer that you will see us partnering, will give everybody a very clear understanding of how we're positioned in the sector. And we expect to do these clinical trials with the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, like I said, and some of the newest that are very niche focused on psychedelic medicine. We want to work with all of them. So that business can grow very, very quickly because our capital now that we raised is being used to expand the clinical research sites. And in some cases, some of the clinics double as clinical research sites where appropriate. So we want to get as many of those clinical research sites available as possible because the drug developers find that more attractive. And the margins for that clinical trial business. So for example, if a large pharmaceutical company awards you with a trial and that trial consists of multiple sites over, let's say, a year time frame, which would require us to recruit multiple candidates, execute those trials, collect the data, etc., that can be $1 million worth of business, one trial over a year, and the margins are very high. The margins are significantly higher than the outpatient mental health business. So that's why the CRO business becomes very, very attractive to us. We've brought in, I should say, some very specialized groups to help us build that business. Now, we've recently hired a COO, which I'm very proud of, and I'll mention. His name is Pierre Boumansour, and we've got a news release out just a couple of days ago on this. Pierre was formerly the COO of Life Labs. Life Labs is one of Canada's largest medical service companies, and it did $1 billion in revenue in Pierre's time when he left in 2019. So this was not long ago. This is the scope of what we're trying to build. We are trying to build, as you said, you can call it picks and shovels, you can call it infrastructure. We are going to build at scale the places where people are going to access these treatments, and as well the places where the drug developers are going to develop the drugs. And I'll just add, in terms of the people we brought in along with Pierre, he understands the CRO space well, but there's others we've brought in, and they too believe, and I think your audience can validate for themselves. If you look at all the news flow around how much capital is flowing to drug development, well, where do you think that drug development gets done? If you really are going to get to phase 3, you need thousands of sites across the world. Imagine that, thousands of clinical trial sites like ours across the world. So that's the role we're going to play, whether it's clinics or clinical research sites. You can't do without the picks and shovels, as you know, in any business. And, frankly, I believe that we're going to be a top 5 player when it's all said and done. That's what we're striving to be. We don't operate from a position of scarcity. So in fact, I would like to see some of my peers succeed. Maybe they'll have a particular focus. Maybe they'll have a geographic focus. But in a world where again, thousands of clinics and clinical research sites will exist to both access and advance psychedelic medicine, I think we're going to be a top player in there. And that's why I'm comfortable talking about hundreds of millions in revenue, because that will be the outcome if we reach our goals.
Okay, so that's real. Okay, so I mean that's kind of the big upside. The contract research side is, that's essentially $1 billion opportunity. Is kind of the bottom line.
The bottom line for me is that Novamind is that opportunity, and I guess, Jack, I'd also say, truly you almost get
I
some
mean, for you,
diversification, right?
the contract research side is going to be that's where you see the big money. That basically, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll come from both, and I think that essentially investors are going to benefit from both lines of business. So there's a symbiotic relationship there. Again, if we're involved in a clinical trial for MDMA that's expected to be legal in 2023, I think there's a good chance that the clients are going to trust us as the place to access their own MDMA experience. So that's why both of those things work in tandem. And every time you see us in a trial, you should expect that there's other clients and people out there seeing the same thing and trying to access one of our clinics, hopefully, which will be expanding geographically as far and wide as we can.
Okay. Yaron, we're running a little bit short of time. We're going to have you back. I think we're going to have you back next to do the full presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity to get very good questions now. I kind of want to, ask a few of my own, and can maybe get to the audience. But tell us, can you tell the audience about like your background and some of the other key players on the team? Like, how did you get involved in space?
Happy to. I've been a venture capital investor and operator for about 20 years now. What that means is that I've been investing in early stage companies, and in most cases, taking either a lead executive role as a CEO or CFO or on the board and working with those companies. So I'm very active in the businesses I build. And I co-founded Novamind, I mentioned earlier, it was about 2 years ago. And my co-founders are Sruli Weinreb and Jesse Kaplan, both based in Toronto, and they run a firm called Plaza Capital. We've had a lot of success together, the three of us as partners, having invested and built businesses in a range of sectors: cannabis, renewable energy, technology, mining, among others. So while I'm not a medical scientist and I'm not a domain expert in psychedelic medicine, my expertise is in building venture companies. And in this case, like in many other cases, we partnered. Again, I've mentioned Dr. Reed Robison and some other people. So our role specifically, myself as CEO and Jesse and Sruli, who are still on the board, it's about building these businesses, putting teams together, putting the risk capital that's required early, and essentially creating the best and strongest platform possible so that we can then bring in the people with their domain expertise to build out clinics, to build out clinical research sites, to develop therapeutic protocols that can then be disseminated widely. So our focus is on financing the company, making sure it's well capitalized. We have a large network and a large following of people who have been involved in our other businesses. So we've raised all the capital for this company ourselves, and we've only listed for a couple of weeks. So for the most part, we've been under the radar, and until we went public, we didn't want to do too much talking. But now we're ready, and I'd encourage your viewers to take a look at our deck, take a look at our website. My co-founders are listed there as well, and you can look at our backgrounds and our track record for sure.
We're gonna have next week. We'll have you back. We'll do the whole full presentation, and I hope we're gonna have like an hour basically where we can answer a lot of questions, all that. Yeah, Ron, I want to ask you in terms of you kind of talked a little bit broadly in terms of scaling else. What's your vision for Novamind? Let's call it long term. I know for a lot of investors, long term is like 3 days, but let's say 3 years out. So 2-3 years out, because really this is the psychedelic. We're really like in the. I don't even know if it's the first inning yet. I mean, it's still a very early stage. It's probably going to. I think this is the year that's kind of going mainstream a little bit, but it's probably next year. It's going to be a 2-3 year play. So what is Novamind going to look like? What kind of revenues do you see potentially generating at 2-3 years out?
It's hard to predict in any linear kind of way, because I really do think the growth is exponential. So we haven't, for example, on our base of clinics, the 4 clinics we've mentioned, without talking about the new clinics and the incremental revenue that'll be added onto that. On the existing base, we've doubled the amount of clients, as I mentioned, right? So that business in terms of client visits doubled year over year. If you extrapolate that over a much larger network of clinics and clinical research sites, And if you add in 2023 as an example, which it's really not long away, a pretty significant and new, think of it almost in finance terms, people talk about a new asset class like Bitcoin, right? It didn't exist before and the flood of interest went in. Well, there will be a new mental health modality available to the market, one that has a profound impact, one that seems to have a curative effect based on the data we're seeing. It's unprecedented is what I'm getting at. So I don't want you or any of your viewers taking my word for it that, my crystal ball tells me that demand's going to be this much and revenue will be that much. But I'll tell you, we're working like hell to be a top 5 player so that those clinics are there, the therapists are trained, and when people go, and we expect a huge rush towards a lot of these not self-administered experiences. Let's remember. So in the order of hundreds of thousands of millions of people that want to have these experiences, that's why I think revenues in the tens and hundreds of millions is absolutely the stated goal. And if we're operating at a scale of 20 plus clinics, I think you'll see very quickly double digit, tens of millions of revenue.
Okay. So let's, I guess one of the questions people are, I think a couple of people ask, are your patients, just to be clear, are you only in Utah? Are you expanding out of Utah? I mean, how patients are coming, from out of state? Like, you have a national kind of goal, right? Or global, maybe.
Absolutely. I'd say global. Absolutely.
We're starting to have 4 clinics there, but that's not the end. That's not the end of the story.
That's right. It's the beginning of the story. And to be really specific, the reason we're in Utah is because one of the luminaries in psychedelic medicine, Dr. Reed Robison, who's now our CMO, decided to establish his clinic. So he is both a clinician and a research scientist. His business has started there, and that's the reason we're there. Getting that expertise was ultra important to us. Again, we built this business designed on the thesis that we wanted to treat people today with the best available alternatives. Whether they were doing that on the moon or doing it in Utah, I was going to find those people and partner with them. We've done that. Now we take that knowledge and we disseminate absolutely in the US. You can expect in the next couple months a new jurisdiction to be announced. And then globally, again, we already have investments in the Netherlands. So we've made moves to expand globally already.
Okay. Yaron, what kind of milestones do you have coming up over the next couple of months? Let's just say the next, again, our audience, very short attention spans. They want instant gratification. What do you have in the next, let's just say 8 to 10 weeks? What kind of milestones that investors can look forward to?
So things I've talked about: clinics opening, number one. You're going to see clinic expansion in weeks and months. You're going to see clinical research site expansion in weeks and months, and you're going to see news specific in that timeline to new clinical trials that we're working on. Again, we have a pipeline of clinical trials, so of course we have to get the approvals necessary, but we're working on these things in real time, so as soon as they're ready, we're happy to announce them and of course share that information. So clinics are opening, clinical research sites and clinical trials are being added. And the third one, I think it'll have, in fact, the biggest impact on our business is you'll see more people being added. So I mentioned, of course, Pierre, who used to run as COO, a $1 billion medical services company. And you're going to see more additions. I mentioned my expertise is in building venture companies. I've had a lot of success at that with my partners, but I'm not a psychiatrist, obviously, and I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not a builder of CROs. So there's people who have done that for decades. They have the expertise to do that, and we're working with those people. And I think you'll see more announcements of some high-profile people joining our team.
So Yaron, are you saying that basically at some point you're going to replace yourself? Like maybe you go in the chairman role, you bring in a CEO that had, I don't know, something in the medical space or something which is,
I didn't say that, to be clear. I didn't say that. Although really, I am very comfortable with what my domain expertise is and isn't. So right now, it's focused, in fact, on finding those people who are going to help us grow within each of those verticals that I mentioned, whether it's clinical research or the clinics themselves. So I'm really focused on making sure that putting those people together, creating the structure for the organization and the strategies that we execute, and making sure that we have the capital to execute on our business plan, which so far, investors have shown a lot of trust in us. We've raised all that money from our networks. Again, we've only been public a few weeks. So the expectation is that we're there to supercharge our business plan with capital. And that's why we went public.
Okay.
And that's what I do.
Okay. Your last question, which we ask every CEO repeatedly almost. But so in your opinion, what are the top 3 reasons why investors should consider Novamind right now?
The first, without a doubt, is that we're treating people. And I keep mentioning it because I think investors, stakeholders, wherever they are, need to differentiate. Our business does not rely on something to be delivered in the future. Our business will expand by leaps and bounds when regulatory and policy changes take effect, so that new drugs are available. But it's not required for us, and so you'll see that growth during and after the advent of those drugs being made legal. The second thing is the clinical research side. I think that the more people we work with and the more news and the more information we share, people will understand the connection that I'm trying to point out, that success in working on the clinical trials should and will likely translate into success in treating people in clinics. It's a direct connection there, and if we succeed at one, we should succeed at the other. The third and final thing I haven't talked a lot about, maybe we'll leave it for another time, but within Cedar Clinical Research, our CRO, we're doing investigator-led research, which means self-funded research. When we have an opportunity to study something, we don't have to go find a CRO and pay someone to design a trial for us to recruit patients and to report on that data. So we, in fact, are already doing this ourselves. This is research that we've funded, where we are designing trials using specific compounds and designing our own therapeutic protocols. We're bringing people into the lab and reporting on that data, and we've had some great success. So that's something you'll hear about. We're going to develop more protocols that are focused on very specific indications. I'll stop there.
Okay, excellent. Actually, one last question, which is, I think, kind of, I should have asked you is, you just started trading in Canada, really. When are you going to be on the OTC? Because most of our audience really is US. So and that's probably one of the catalysts for the next catalyst for the stock is the US buyers.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big catalyst for the stock. We've done a lot of meetings, and there's a lot of interest in the US and people that are waiting to buy our stock, some that are just doing it on the Canadian market now. So we expect to be listed on the OTCQB. I'd say we're probably 4 to 6 weeks away based on the update I got yesterday. So we're very diligently pursuing that. And I'd encourage your viewers anywhere to have a look at us on the CSE, as I've spoken to a lot of American clients that have been able to buy it on the Canadian exchange.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, the opportunity now is to,
I wouldn't be waiting for the OTCQX listing. That's right.
Perfect. Okay, Yaron, thank you, and I'll see. We'll see you next week for the full presentation, and hopefully we're going to have opportunity to answer all the questions, because we've got probably 15 questions we didn't get a chance to get to. So we'll see you next week.
I'll look forward to it. That was fun. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, guys.